March 16, 1962. It had been exactly 1 year since the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion ended in failure. Inside the White House, the Kennedy administration was pivoting. Overt invasion had failed, leaving the executive branch demanding a systematic, covert approach to destabilizing Cuba. This was Operation Mongoose. The objective was to engineer a justification for war, a pretext that would make U.S. intervention look like a necessary response to Cuban aggression. The architect of these proposals was Brigadier General Edward Lansdale, an officer whose career was built on the mechanics of covert influence. Every plan Lansdale's team brainstormed had to satisfy the constraint of plausible deniability. The United States needed to be able to disavow its role, forcing planners to create increasingly artificial and complex scenarios. By early 1962, the vast American military apparatus had shifted its strategic focus. They were no longer simply preparing for a potential conflict. They were planning exactly how to initiate one. The framework for this escalation was established during a meeting with the president on March 16th, preserved in a memorandum drafted by Lansdale. That meeting produced a companion document, an itemized catalog of military and intelligence actions designed specifically to harass and disrupt the Castro government. Titled Possible Actions to Provoke, Harass, or Disrupt Cuba, the dossier presented extreme measures with the clinical detachment of a standard bureaucratic checklist. This document represents the collective brainstorming of the U.S. defense establishment, all aimed at forcing a specific geopolitical incident. To truly understand the precise mechanics of this engineered statecraft, we have to deconstruct these proposals beat by beat. The memo organizes its proposals into tiers. The first is non-kinetic disruption, actions designed to destabilize Cuba without immediate open military violence. Planners suggested massive propaganda leaflet drops across the island, intended to manipulate public sentiment and spark an internal civilian uprising against the Castro regime. The list detailed specific methods of economic sabotage, including the disruption of agricultural production and the targeted interference of international trade. The goal was to manufacture visible failure within the state. By degrading the quality of daily life, planners hoped to turn the populace against the government. These operations were calibrated to achieve regime change while technically staying beneath the threshold of international acts of war. Throughout the text, the primary metric for success is diplomatic isolation, the total removal of Cuba from the international community. In the effort to isolate Castro, the U.S. military viewed the daily lives and livelihoods of Cuban civilians as legitimate tactical targets. The second category of proposals involved manufactured pretexts, incidents engineered to look like unprovoked Cuban attacks. One plan suggested staging simulated attacks at the perimeter of the U.S. naval base at Guantanamo Bay to provide a localized justification for retaliation. Other proposals focused on the harassment of commercial and civilian vessels in the Florida Straits, creating a pretext for U.S. naval intervention. The maritime section even suggested using fake Cuban vessels, U.S. assets physically disguised, to attack neutral shipping lanes. The brainstorming reached a dark extreme. Planners suggested the U.S. could blow up its own ship or stage a funeral for fake victims to generate domestic outrage for a war. These concepts closely aligned with the later disclosed Operation Northwoods, demonstrating a shared mindset among high-ranking military planners. These plans reveal a willingness to treat American lives and property as expendable props in a larger geopolitical theater. Beyond the content of the plans, the language used in the memo is itself a tool of statecraft. The formatting creates a professional distance from the violence it describes. The text relies on the passive voice. By stating, an incident should be arranged, the planners avoided naming the specific individuals who would be responsible for the deception. They used sanitized jargon like kinetic engagement or maritime harassment to describe actions that were, in reality, triggers for a shooting war. The rigid numbering system, listing these ideas in paragraphs and subsections, helps a reader process extreme provocations as if they were simple administrative tasks. This clinical tone stands in stark contrast to the violent, chaotic reality these plans would have unleashed on the ground. The true danger of these memos was their ability to make the manufacturing of war look like a routine clerical function. While the most extreme false flag proposals were never executed, The posture of harassment became official U.S. policy. This constant pressure created a self-fulfilling prophecy of escalation with the Soviet Union. Following this period of harassment, Soviet military shipments to Cuba surged, bringing heavy equipment and aircraft crates that were easily spotted by U.S. surveillance. The Soviets and Cubans interpreted this covert harassment not as a deniable operation, but as the clear precursor to a full-scale U.S. invasion. The bureaucratic brainstorming of March 1962 laid the procedural and psychological groundwork for the nuclear standoff that followed in October. Ultimately, John F. Kennedy had to weigh these bureaucratic proposals against the risk of global nuclear war. These memos reveal the architecture of provocation, the reality that once a bureaucracy is tasked with creating a pretext for war, it will inevitably produce dangerous and extreme results. The 1962 memos are artifacts of a period where the line between gathering intelligence and manufacturing reality was intentionally blurred. Though we view them as history, they reflect the standard procedural playbook for high-level covert statecraft. They serve as a permanent warning. The most dangerous part of any war is often the bureaucratic process that engineers its beginning.